Hello, this is Mrs. Brown, and today we're going to be solving equations that have parentheses. Now, there are two ways that we can actually solve these, and depending on the situation, one might be easier than the other. When I'm looking at this, this is 5 times this quantity, 5 times this sum. So in other words, I have to add these together and then multiply by -5. So a way to think about this is if I had a one-step equation that looked like this, I would have -5 times mystery number equals 30. Well, what would I do? Well, I do the opposite of multiplication, which would be division. And so -5 divided by -5 is 1. And so 1 times a is a, and I would do 30 divided by -5 is -6. I can use this same idea in order to solve this without distributing, because the other way is to use the distributive property and distribute that negative. So let's take a look at the method related to this, and then I will show you using the distributive property how I can solve it that way. And again, some situations one's going to be easier than the other. It just depends. So if I look at this, it's -5 times this whole thing inside parentheses. So normally I get rid of like the adding or subtracting, but it's inside parentheses. This sum has to happen before I can multiply. So in this case, because of the parentheses and this being inside, I'm actually getting rid of the 5 first, the -5. So -5 divided by -5 is 1, and 1 times anything is that anything, which means I'm left with m plus 4 equals 30 divided by -5. Well, 30 divided by 5 is 6, and a positive divided by a negative would be a negative. Okay, so then I can finish solving. The opposite of adding is subtracting. That gives me nothing because +4 and -4 are opposites. And so I end up with -10 because, again, -6 plus -4, you're getting more negative. It's like I owe you $6 and I borrow 4 more. I now owe you 10. Okay, so that's one way that I can use to solve this question. So let's look at how to distribute instead. Okay. All right, so the other method I can use is use the distributive property. So you guys are familiar with the distributive property. So -5 times m is -5m, plus -5 times 4 is -20, or you could just put -20, whichever you prefer, equals 30. Okay. So from here, again, if I want to think of this as a -20, then I would add 20 to both sides. So -5 times m equals 50, because 30 plus 20 is 50. The opposite of multiplying by -5 is dividing by -5. So -5 divided by -5 is 1, and 1 times m is m, equals 50 divided by -5 is -10. And so I get the same answer either way. And I can substitute it back in if I do -5 times -10 plus 4, and I want to see if that equals 30. -10 plus 4. These are opposites, and I'm adding, so that means I'm really subtracting. So 10 minus 4 is 6. There's more negatives, so it's -6. And -6 times -5, well, 5 times 6 is 30. They're both negative, which makes it a positive, so it does, in fact, work out. Okay, so let's look at another example. Okay, sometimes it may be written backwards, so to speak, where you have the single number and either the sum or the difference first. That's okay. This is actually the same thing as this, so if you're more comfortable with it that way, turn it around. It's no big deal. And we still have the same set of choices. I can either distribute the -4, or I can treat it like -4 times this thing in parentheses, because I have to do the subtraction before multiplying by the -4. That's what the parentheses tell me. So I can go ahead and divide by -4 and divide by -4 and deal with it that way. Okay, this method works really good if this number is divisible by this number. It just makes it a lot easier. If this number isn't necessarily divisible by that number, then a lot of times it's easier to distribute. So it's just going to depend on the situation. Negative 4 divided by negative 4 is 1. 1 times t minus 3 is t minus 3. 12 divided by 4 is 3. It's 1 positive and 1 negative, so it's going to be negative 3. The opposite of subtracting 3 is adding 3. So t equals 0, because negative 3 plus 3 is 0. Okay, and if I check this, 0 minus 3 is negative 3. Negative 3 times negative 4 would give me positive 12. So let's look if we distributed instead what this problem would look like. Again, I should come out with t equals 0. Okay, so again, if you're more comfortable, just rewrite it this way. That negative 4, this is the commutative property, allows me to put the multiplication in a different order. So I can put that negative 4 in front to make it seem more normal, if that's what makes it easier for you. So I'm going to start by distributing the negative 4. Remember, I'm going to treat this like plus a negative, because adding a negative number is the same as subtracting a positive number, and then I'm way less likely to make mistakes with my positive and negative signs. So negative 4 times t is negative 4t, plus negative 4 times negative 3 is positive 12. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is subtract 12 from both sides. I get negative 4t equals nothing. And 0 divided by negative 4, still 0. So I come out with the same answer either way. Again, you're going to pick what's going to be easiest for you. You can divide out, do like negative 4 times quantity equals 12, and divide by negative 4, or you can distribute it out if that's easier. Okay, let's look at one more example with a fraction. Ooh, promise it's not super scary. All right. So when you have this question, you have to stop and think about fractions and when you divide by a fraction, because this is 5/7 times, so we'd be doing the opposite, which would be dividing if we're going to move it to the other side first, like we've been practicing. When I divide by a fraction, let's say I wanted to do 25 divided by 5/7, this is where I keep it, change it, flip it. Keep it, change it, flip it. Keep it, change it, flip it. So keep the first fraction, change the sign to multiplication, and flip the second fraction. Hey, look, 5 goes into 25 evenly. And in fact, 5 goes into 25 5 times, and 5 goes into 5 once. This gives me a really easy process of getting 35. So when you're looking at this problem at first glance, it may be like, ooh, I don't want to divide 25 by 5/7. But actually, it makes the problem pretty simple to do that if you're using the keep it, change it, flip it. Okay, so this goes bye-bye. You're left with r minus 3 equals, and we just determined that 25 divided by 5/7 is going to come out to 35. And then I'm going to erase this part. Okay, so then I add 3 to both sides, and I end up with 38. So r equals 38. Again, even though there was a fraction, it wasn't super scary, even though it might have been like, eee, at first. Okay, so again, fractions are your friends when you get to algebra, I promise. Decimals make everything kind of messy. So let's look at it if I'm going to distribute, because I'm going to tell you right now that this one distributed is going to make it a lot more challenging. One of the reasons, when you add and subtract fractions, you have to have a common denominator, and it just adds some extra steps and doesn't make it as simple as just dividing out by 5/7. So I would, on these problems, a lot of them are going to be much, much simpler if you divide it out instead of distribute. So if I distribute the 5/7, it's 5/7 times r minus, and then again, when you're multiplying a fraction by a whole number, the whole number gets put over 1. So this becomes 15/7. So minus 15/7 equals 25. Now I have to use my rules for solving like a two-step equation, which means I have to start by adding 15/7. Okay, so now in order to add this, is going to go to nothing because they're opposites. But for 25 plus 15/7, I now have to find the common denominator of 7. So because this is a 1. So times by 7 gives me 175. I do 175 plus 15 is 190 over 7. So I'm left with 5/7 times r equals 190 divided by 7. So if I do the opposite of multiplying by 5/7, which is dividing by 5/7, I know when I divide, I'm going to flip and multiply. So actually, I need this to turn out to 1, so I could just multiply by 7/5. And what that is, because if I'm dividing by 5/7, I'm going to end up multiplying by the reciprocal anyways. I'm going to be multiplying by 7/5. So I just kind of skipped a step because 5 times 7 is 35, and 7 times 5 is 35. So 35 divided by 35 is going to be 1. So those are going to cancel. When I take a look at 190 over 7 times 7/5, 7 and 7 are divisible, so I can get rid of those. And then 5 goes into 190, you're going to have to divide it out 38 times. And you come up with the same answer, but this way seems a lot more complicated than just dividing out by 5/7 and then flipping it and all that. Okay? I hope this helps, and have a fabulous day.